Did former ambassador to Ukraine, Marie Yovanovitch, lie about not giving a do not prosecute list in Ukraine? Time to release the transcripts, Speaker Pelosi. Hello, this is Robert Romano, Vice President of Public Policy with Americans for Limited Government, dailytorch.com. Hit that subscribe button. Today, we're going to be talking about a former ambassador to Ukraine, Marie Yovanovitch, again. She's now testified before Congress, and she's making, she's challenging the assertions by former Prosecutor General in Ukraine, Yuriy Lutsenko, who said that the ambassador had given him a do-not-prosecute list. In her testimony, you can read it for yourself on WashingtonPost.com. As for events during my tenure in Ukraine, quote, I want to categorically state I have never, myself or through others, directly or indirectly, ever directed, suggested, or in any other way asked for any government or government official in Ukraine or elsewhere to refrain from investigating or prosecuting actual corruption. As Mr. Lutsenko, the former Ukrainian Prosecutor General, has recently acknowledged, the notion that I created or disseminated a do not prosecute list is completely false, a story that Mr. Lutsenko himself has since retracted. Now, the allegations were originally made in March, on March 20, to The Hill's John Solomon, where he said that there was this do not prosecute list. He said that, quote, unfortunately, from the first meeting with the U.S. ambassador in Kiev, Yovanovitch gave me a list of people whom we should not prosecute. Now, the retraction that Yovanovitch is now referring to is from an April 17 report from the Babel web publication in Ukraine. It's been translated into English by the UNIAN Information Agency. And the headline says, Ukraine Prosecutor General admits U.S. Ambassador did not give him a do not prosecute list. Of course, this has got to be one of the most misleading headlines I've ever read, because if you actually read the transcript of what they put into their article, this translation from the Babel publication, Lutsenko saying, quote, the meeting with the ambassador took place in the Prosecutor General's office at this very table in January 2017. She was accompanied, so was I. Mrs. Yovanovitch was interested in the Vitaly Kasko case. The fact was that Mr. Kasko's mother got registered for official housing in Kiev, but she had never left Lviv. That had signs of abuse. Lutsenko recalled Yovanovitch, insisting Kasko was an outstanding anti-corruption activist, and the, quote, the criminal case discredited those who were fighting against corruption. Quote, I shared the details and explained that I could not open and close cases on my own. I listed some so-called anti-corruption activists under investigation. She said it was unacceptable as it would undermine the credibility of anti-corruption activists. I took a piece of paper, put down the listed names, and said, give me a do not prosecute list. She said, no, you've got me wrong. I said, quote, no, I didn't get you wrong. Such lists were earlier drawn up in Bankova Street, referring to the Yanukovych administration, and now you give me new lists on Tankova Street, referring to the U.S. Embassy. The meeting ended. I'm afraid the emotions were not very good. And here he's saying, you give me lists, that she objected to the prosecution of the Kasko case. This is what Yovanovitch is pointing to as a retraction, that Lutsenko said, oh, I didn't get a do not prosecute list, in a statement where he says, you give me lists, people not to prosecute, and specifically naming the prosecutions that she was objecting to, which were against so-called anti-corruption activists in Ukraine. So that's some retraction. Now, in the same interview that Yovanovitch says Lutsenko retracted his statement about being told who not to prosecute, Lutsenko appears to have actually doubled down and said that Yovanovitch told him the people he was prosecuting would undermine the credibility of anti-corruption activists. Again, here's what he said, quote, I listed some so-called anti-corruption activists under investigation, and she said it was unacceptable as it would undermine the credibility of anti-corruption activists, and, quote, now you give me lists. Clearly still accusing her of producing do not prosecute lists. So if that's a retraction, I don't know. I mean, someone should question Yovanovitch, maybe on the House side, or that maybe she could be called to testify in the Senate, and they should ask her that question. How is that not saying there was a do not prosecute list? Did Yovanovitch have to sign and date such a list physically for it to have been construed any other way? Lutsenko clearly thought it was corrupt to ask by the U.S. ambassador not to prosecute certain individuals, and he was offended. And the meeting ended very quickly, and that's why he went on with the Hill's John Solomon and made these allegations, and it clearly undermined U.S.-Ukrainian relations. So maybe that's why we needed a new ambassador. She's since been replaced, and by acting Ambassador Bill Taylor, who recently testified to Congress in the impeachment witch hunt. But leaving that aside, now on the March allegation by Lutsenko of a do not prosecute list, that had come after Yovanovitch on March 5th had called for to have an anti-corruption prosecutor basically fired, this Nazar Kolodnitsky, and she says that he was corrupt. But on April 1, John Solomon catches up to Lutsenko, Kolodnitsky, and he said he had reopened the probe into Burisma and Joe Biden. It turns out that they had been into this since the summer of 2018, according to Solomon. Ukrainian prosecutors have said they tried to get the information about Burisma and Joe Biden firing the Prosecutor General Viktor Shokin by threatening $1.2 billion of loan guarantees back to the United States, and they wanted to get it to the Justice Department because they believed it might be violations of U.S. ethics laws. Now, Lutsenko has recently spoken to BBC in Ukraine, and he says that when he talked to Rudy Giuliani, President Trump's attorney, about this, he said, quote, "I told him the same thing I told you. It is not my jurisdiction. It is likely to be the jurisdiction of the United States. If you will send me a request, yes, I will give you all official information, but it is not Ukrainian jurisdiction." That was my answer. So the Ukrainian prosecutors' offices, they've been trying to get information that they believe could have violated U.S. laws to the United States, which is not really surprising because the United States and Ukraine have a mutual legal assistance treaty. So if in 2018 you have this information that comes into the prosecutors over there and they want to get it to the United States, and eventually President Trump asks for the same information in his July 2019 call, and the information originated long before Volodymyr Zelensky was ever elected in Ukraine in April of 2019, and it goes all the way back to summer of 2018 that the Ukrainians have been trying to get us this information. Well, I don't see a quid pro quo there. I think that this whole account kind of destroys the narrative that there was a quid pro quo. Now, Kolodnitsky told Solomon, quote, "We were able to start the case again," talking about Burisma, "but we don't see any result because there's some sort of external influence." Solomon also spoke to Viktor Shokin. Shokin said that he had specific plans for interrogations and other crime investigation procedures into all members of the Burisma executive board, including Hunter Biden. He also noted that he wasn't accusing the Bidens of a crime per se, just that he had plans to interrogate them when he was fired. Now, Giuliani has tried since then to get Shokin a visa to the United States so that he could share this information. This is a piece from The Hill. President Trump's personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, asked the State Department and the White House to grant a visa to former Ukrainian prosecutor who Joe Biden wanted removed when he was vice president. A career diplomat reportedly told Congress this week during closed-door testimony. CNN reported Friday that 4 people familiar with the testimony from Deputy Assistant Secretary of State George Kent said he told lawmakers that around January, Giuliani asked the administration to grant a visa for the former Ukrainian Prosecutor General Viktor Shokin to travel to the United States. He went to the White House after the State Department rejected it. And according to Giuliani, he has said that Shokin told him over Skype that he found evidence of coordination between Democrats and people in Ukraine, as well as unspecified allegations about Biden's son. He said Shokin believes the current ambassador, Marie Yovanovitch, denied his visa and noted that Yovanovitch was close to Biden. So there's another question you could ask Yovanovitch about why was this Shokin's visa, why was it denied by the State Department? Did Yovanovitch know about it? I think that's a really good question. Now, we spoke about the fact that this all originated in 2018. And so again, these are the questions that you need to ask Yovanovitch, starting with Lutsenko's supposed retraction in an interview where Lutsenko clearly stated he was told by Yovanovitch that prosecuting certain individuals would be unacceptable. Had she read this supposed retraction, or was she told about it? Maybe she read a headline. Does she still think it's a retraction? Maybe she should, be compelled to read it in front of the congressional committee and say, do you think that that's a retraction? Or do you think that Lutsenko's still saying you gave him a do not prosecute list? Moreover, did she say that prosecuting certain individuals would be unacceptable and harm their credibility or not? I mean, Lutsenko in this interview is clearly stating that he has witnesses to this meeting. And so you could certainly call Lutsenko to testify and to basically say what he said in this news interview about what really happened in that meeting. Another question would be whether concerns over violations of U.S. laws were ever transmitted to the U.S. Embassy, to Yovanovitch, and if so, were they ever sent to the Justice Department in the United States per our treaty with Ukraine on mutual legal assistance? And if not, why not? Who said that we're not sending that information to the Justice Department? And does she know why the visas were denied? And I'll leave you with the close here, because I think that Yovanovitch's testimony, I think, is very problematic. She's defending herself, but the information she's using to defend herself actually says that she was giving do not prosecute lists to the Ukrainian Prosecutor General, who's basically not backing down from those allegations. Now, perhaps those questions were all asked at the House hearings that are behind closed doors in the House Intelligence Committee. So it's time to release the transcripts, Speaker Pelosi, so the American people can get the whole story. And if they were not asked, then it's up to Senator Lindsey Graham or some other Senate committee, if Graham's got his hands full right now, to convene and call Yovanovitch as a witness. What is Nancy Pelosi hiding? That's the commentary. This is Robert Romano, Vice President of Public Policy with Americans for Limited Government, dailytorch.com. Hit that subscribe button, ring the bell for notifications, and have a good day.